Hi, my name is Gáspár Nagy, and this is a short introduction to the parallel execution features of SpecRun 1.2. SpecRun is a smart execution framework for SpecFlow. Just like with the other videos, I use my Bookshop demo application to demonstrate these features. Bookshop is a small web application that already has some SpecFlow scenarios and configured with SpecRun. Since we have released the first version of SpecRun with parallel execution, I have received many questions and problems regarding this topic. What I have learned from this is that parallel execution is very complex in general, and it's very hard to give general guidelines how to do that properly. So in this demo, I will try to on one hand do it step by step, so start from a single-threaded test execution and arrive to a working parallel execution, and on the other hand, I would like to show you some typical issues that you might also run into if you do parallel execution in your application. One general thing that I would like to highlight is that SpecRun runs each test thread in a separate app domain, so therefore if you or one of the APIs that you use depend on static variables or not thread safe, it's not causing any troubles usually. On the other hand, the dependencies of your application might be problematic. So let's see it through the Bookshop demo application. I have created a parallel profile. Right now, this is just empty. I haven't done anything yet, and it's using a single thread. And I have tested that it runs and passes right now. So let's just do the first thing without too much thinking. Just increase the thread count to 2, and let's try to run the tests. As you can see, the tests have failed, and although maybe it's not that much visible from the error message because you just see some database error, most probably the problem is that right now two test threads are accessing the same database, and they are modifying each other's preconditions or changing the behavior of the test. So this is a typical problem that you also might run into if you use a database or any other shared resources, that if you just simply increase the degree of parallelism, then your test will not run in an isolated mode and will have some unwanted side effects. So one easy option for that is to somehow duplicate also the database as well. This application is using a file-based database, and the database file is configured in the configuration file. So I have a bookshop entities connection string, and as you can see, I have a data source equals bookshop SDF file setting here. So actually, what we would like to do, we would like to use a different file for each single thread. To do that, the easiest way is to configure application configuration transformation in the profile. Usually it's already included in a default file, so I can just undo that. And I have a little bit prepared this, so I have already fixed the bookshop entities, so the connection string name, and I have also set the original value. So what we would need now is to make a change that is different for each individual test thread. To do so, there is a placeholder that you can use called test thread ID, which will actually insert here 0, 1, 2, 3, or any other number depending on the test thread that this test is actually running in. So if I save this, and if I have this configuration transformation, that what we expect is that for the first thread will use the bookshop 0 file, and the other thread will use the bookshop 1 file. Let's test this. Let's rerun the test. And actually, again, we get an error. And if we would go deeper into the error detail, then we would see that actually the problem is that the test execution is using the bookshop acceptance test DLL config file. And if I change it for one thread, and I also want to change it for the different thread, the changes will probably collide with each other. So we not only have to duplicate the database, but we somehow have to also duplicate the config file that we can safely do changes in there. One option for that would be to duplicate the entire folder, the entire execution folder. This was the only possibility in the previous versions of SpecRun, but in the new version of SpecRun there is another option, another deployment transformation step, which is called relocate configuration file. This is actually moving out or duplicating the default configuration file under a different name. So we can maybe call it custom config.config. This would be not enough because this would be still a single file, just named differently. However, we can also use this test thread ID placeholder here. So with that, we have basically changed our configuration file used for test to custom config 0 or custom config 1, and further steps will use this modified name. So even though that I was referring for that as app config, the transformation steps are smart enough. So this one will modify the file that I have relocated before. So let's rerun the test now. And what we can see in the debug folder is that we have a custom config 1, custom config 2 files, and we also have the two databases. So this looks pretty good. And as you can see, the tests are passing. With that, we were able to configure our test execution in a way that it can support parallel execution as well. So we could even increase the parallel level even more, and these will be running still. One thing that you probably have noticed is that we are still running in the bin debug folder of our project, which is fine for such a small number of tests. However, let's imagine that I have a test suite which runs for half an hour. Probably running it in the bin debug folder of my Visual Studio is not such a good idea, because then I cannot work and cannot develop more features in the meanwhile. So let's try to further change the configuration in a way that the entire test execution is isolated from my development environment. One idea that you can do is what I have mentioned already, that you could relocate the entire folder for each different test thread. So maybe you can relocate it to the temp directory. This would be a folder copy for each single thread, which is probably okay for 2 threads, but not that nice for multiple threads. Instead of that, what you can do, you can use a special section of the deployment transformation element, which is called global steps. In this global steps section, you can list transformation steps that are not depending on a single thread, but these are done only once before all threads would have been configured. So let's make a relocate transformation as a global step. Let's put it into the temp directory, and let's leave the others as they were. But let's remove this load filter so we have a little bit more time to watch what happened. So let's clean this bin debug folder before, so that we see that we have no new files there. And let's run the parallel execution once more. You can see that we don't have any custom config and whatever files there. However, in the temp BSD folder, we have all this thing that we did before. Still, we can do compilation and any other development work with our Visual Studio while the tests are running. In SpecRun 1.2, we have improved the features that are related to collecting outputs or any other test results. So, for example, in the console, you can specify an output folder parameter, and you can set where the output folder should be. If you don't specify anything, then the original base folder, in our case the bin debug folder inside our solution, will be the output folder. So let's go back to our test and let's try to implement such a scenario. In my case, I would like to add a small code part that is capturing some application trace in case of an error. So let's create a new file. Actually, this will be a SpecFlow hooks file, and I will just add a method marked with after scenario, which I have prepared already. Actually, what this method does, first of all, it runs after every scenario execution, and if there was an error during the execution, it wants to write out this trace information into a file. Now the question marks are here. Where shall I produce this file? Now the good news is that in SpecRun 1.2, the current folder of the execution is always set to the output folder that you have configured. So this means that if you want to just produce a file, you can just use simple file names like app.trace, and this will be always placed into the output folder regardless of the relocation configuration you did in the profile settings. The other option is to use an environment variable that is set by SpecRun for the execution, which is called SpecRun.output folder, and you can use this environment variable as well. Of course, in this case, I have to use the environment .expand environment variables method to have a proper file path. I hope this video helped you to understand how parallel execution works in SpecRun, and you can also use it in your project. Just like before, I would like to highlight that the NuGet package of SpecRun contains a speclog file and the HTML export of that file, where you can find further information about the parallel execution and the other features as well. Just search for parallel, and in the user story that you find there, you can find all the details and some configuration options about parallel execution.